Hi, everyone. So just want to take a few minutes to introduce you to Shama Magar. She's our wonderful speaker today. And just to remind you, this is the beginning of a three-part series. So we hope that you're able to join us for all three parts. We start today with the demographics, then we'll do marketing in September, and then we'll do discovering your brand. So welcome, Shama.
Yes. Hi, guys. I love it. It's like there's a wave of people sitting more over here, not so much over here. Hopefully more people come fill out over here. I'm so excited to be here. The last time I was here, I was met with so much enthusiasm of what's happening in retail, what's happening in small businesses. I had a chance to walk around lots of stores last time. I will certainly do more of the same today and tomorrow. Mood lighting. And what was so exciting about that was just the sheer level of enthusiasm and excitement and entrepreneurialism that's here. Both entrepreneurialism from businesses that have been around for a long time and businesses that are launching. And so sometimes when we think about entrepreneurialism and business and rejuvenating and new ideas, we go, oh, I've been in business for 40 years, or I've been in this industry for so long, and what can I do? You know, I think I know my customer. I think I know what I'm doing, and you know, what more can I learn? Right? And then we have these startups that are like, I'm so excited, I just want to do it. And you're like, all right, guys, on both sides, let's take a step back. Let's take a step back and kind of evaluate where we are. What are we doing? What does the market tell us? Right? Us as individuals, or oftentimes as consumers, right? We are the best people to understand how we shop. We are the best people to understand how we do business, what our values and priorities are. But yet, for some reason, when we think about our customer, we detach ourselves from the entire selling and marketing experience, right? We think of ourselves as speaking at them, speaking to them, not speaking with them, right? Not having a dialogue and a conversation, but rather putting up a set of words and images because we've been told that these are things that we're supposed to do, right? So yes, Francesca mentioned this is one in a three-part series. Today, this topic is actually really applicable for anyone. It's applicable for the city as we think about how to communicate with the retailers, with the people who live here. It's applicable for any business owner who's interested in furthering their communication with how they're developing marketing, advertising, and even product, right? In this day and age, when we think about our customers, and when we think about the relationship with our customers, it's really important that we start to think 360 degrees, right? We're not just selling them products, we are selling ideas, right? We are selling emotions. And sometimes we ask ourselves, well, what on earth are those ideas and what are those emotions? So anyway, not to give everything away from today's experience for you, but what I really encourage you guys to do is in today's workshop and in this lecture, we have so much great information. I urge you to really think about how this applies to your business. You know, I'd encourage you to create a conversation with me and with your peers. If there are ideas and things that are coming up that you want to ask questions about or further explore, this is my time here for you, right? So let's make the most of that. In the afternoon, we do have a breakout workshop. And it's for select retailers, and we have some amazing retail and business owners here who are going to be joining us in the afternoon. But I encourage you guys for the following workshops that we have coming up to definitely sign up for that. Mostly because sometimes after an amazing lecture, we have all these great ideas, but we don't actually know how to apply that, right? How do I actually go back and sit down and really make sure that I know how to do the things that I've been inspired to do? And that's really what the breakout sessions are for, right? It's an opportunity to roll up your sleeves, get a little bit deeper, and really start to figure out, well, what does it mean when Shama says blah, 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 right? How do I actually apply that, right? What are the best ways to understand that? So I encourage you for future sessions to please sign up for the workshops. And without further delay, let's get started. The title for today in the series is How to Strategize for the Holidays. And, Francesca and I were talking and we were like, man, are people really thinking about the holidays now? Well, if you're on the product side or you're launching a retail company, you certainly are thinking about holidays now because you're buying product now for the holiday, right? And so from a product standpoint, we go, oh yes, I'm buying now for future deliveries. But today we're going to talk about really the most foundational element, which is understanding your customer. Without knowing your customer, it is impossible for us to be able to equip your businesses with the right marketing and communication tools to even use social media properly, to even launch a Facebook ad in the way that it needs to be launched, to even be able to, I don't know, put up a poster in the right way. Any effort that you spent without understanding your customer is effort that is wasted, right? Because you have no idea how to track and measure those ROIs or who you're even talking to. Okay, here I am. So Scaling Retail, I am the founder and CEO of Scaling Retail. We are a business strategy and creative marketing agency. So what we do on business strategy is we help business owners really help to understand not just their market potential and what we see as possible in the marketplace, but then actually help them do it on the agency side. I've been really fortunate enough to work with an amazing group of people on a global level. Most recently, we were working with the United Nations to do an activation both in the US and Japanese markets for a Pashmina collective, right? So even retail applies to the United Nations, right? When we think about transactions and selling, it applies to anyone who's exchanging a good or a service for dollars, right? We are in the process of transacting. So I am based in Los Angeles. I have a great amount of experience coming out of New York City, really at the helm and leading businesses like Barney's and Gucci, and maybe you guys have heard of Macy's. But my background really comes from that retail standpoint. So let's uncover our customer. Most of you guys today who are sitting in this room who have existing customers and who have been in business for a long time might have noticed that customers are changing. About a year ago, people were dreaming and talking about a retail apocalypse, right? What's happening in terms of transactions? Well, most of you guys are probably still in business, right? Business has evolved and it's changed because our customers have evolved and our customers have changed. In some cases, the businesses that you may have launched, you may have garnered customers that you never knew would be interested in your product, right? Sometimes we launch something and we think we're talking to one person, but the way that we talk and how we deliver that information and our price points really attract a different customer, right? And at the end, we're like, oh my gosh, my customer is totally different, right? So what do you do with that information? So uncovering your customer becomes a really important part of our conversation, both for the existing customers, and we'll talk today about analytics and looking at software and different ways of being able to mine for data. Kind of a scary word sometimes when you hear about data and everything that's going on a more political level in our country, but just data for small businesses is so important. There have been so many great tools and software that have been launched in order to really help equip small businesses to understand their customers better through using data. We're also going to go through a bunch of exercises today. You have in front of you those handouts and those great printouts that are really going to help drive a lot of the understanding and give you some tools to help you go into the market and be able to actually apply this and take this home today to do something about it. So the big thing that you will walk out of today with is getting to be able to create a customer oracle. Now, what do I mean by a customer oracle? Well, a customer oracle is essentially a document that helps drive a lot of the decision-making processes that you will enact in your business. It's one thing to do a lot of exercises, but have it not lead to anything, right? So we really want to encourage you to think about having a customer oracle as a big piece of your delivery of your homework, whether or not you're attending today's breakout session or not. Right? By the end, I would say, of about a month period, you should have a fully built out customer oracle based on the tools and exercises that you will be getting from today. Now, when we think about the customer oracle, it's going to touch on the emotional key points of your customer. It's going to touch on their strengths. It's going to touch on what they are most concerned about. It's going to touch on the key emotional drivers. And it's also going to tell you things like what time of day they shop more. It's also going to tell you about the price points that they purchase, right? So it's both going to be on an emotional side, but also on a data-driven side. let's set the stage. So when we think about who our customer is, this is a conversation that happens more often than not, right? I get on the phone call with a business and I say, all right, guys, tell me about your customer. Or I'm starting a company. Tell me about your customer. Oh, well, this customer, she's between 24 to 35. She makes $50,000 a year. She, drives this kind of car. And they're basically just pulling market research data from various statistics and things that they've heard of, right? Have any of you guys ever used these traditional market household income statistics before? Yes? Yeah. I'm sure more of you have, but are too shy to raise your hands. And when we think about who our customer is, right, our customer goes much more beyond that, right? Our customer is not just someone who's within a certain age demographic. In fact, I even encourage you to ask yourselves, when your parents were your age, were they dressing and behaving and experiencing life the way you do? No. So why are we using the exact same marketing and the exact same analysis of who our customer is, right, as we used to do before? It's change, right? When we take a look at how customers are spending and who our customer is, it's important that we start to understand it goes much more deeper than just basic demographic information. And how do we make this conversation a little bit more meaningful? Right? Here we say, how do you know what their pain points are? Right? Why are they shopping with you and not with anyone else? And when we want to find out the answers to that, more often than not, what I get from people is, oh, well, I just, this is what I feel or what I see on my selling floor, right? Or this is just what I'm hearing qualitatively. Or this is what I've been reading about. So I'm going to tell this to you so that it sounds like I know what I'm talking about. However, at the end of the day, even if you are on the selling floor, if you're not analyzing your data, what you hear is so important, but it doesn't make up the entire picture, right? It's the data plus, right, your emotional understanding and those conversations with your customers that actually help you figure out exactly what is going on. Right? It's not just one, it's not the other. I'm also not a huge fan of people who are solely data-driven. Data on its own misses the boat on the human experience. When you only think about data or what your Google Analytics is telling you, right, you miss out on the entire conversation of how someone is feeling, right? The emotional touch point, the rational versus the unrational, right? And as we talk more today, customers are driven by both irrational choices and rational ones. And while you think you might be putting out a product that is, uniquely price point to really be a value driver, if your content and your visual assets are not supporting that, then your unique value proposition won't get very far. So how do we elevate our conversations? How do we make them more meaningful? Well, we pull in data points, we pull in facts, we pull in our qualitative analysis, and we start to implement some of these tools that we're talking about today. So here are some common pitfalls that I see most of the time. When we think about the time that it's going to take for you to do the work that I'm asking you to do, you might say to yourself, I don't have any time. You might say to yourself that I think I already have the answers to this already. You might say to yourself that, hey, business is fine, and yes, I would love to take this time to do this, but hey, I'm doing okay, right? So I must already have my finger on the pulse, and I maybe don't need to change anything. However, if you want to be relevant, if you want your business to grow with your consumer, if you don't want your business to die out as your customer base moves on, right? It's very important that you take a look at your customer positioning and this customer oracle every 5 years, and really do the deep dive research. A lot of things we're going to talk about are going to be immediate things you should be looking at on a weekly basis, monthly basis. You should be making actions and decisions and integrate these tools and processes on a really habitual level. Right? However, the sit down, let's take a lot of time, let's build this customer oracle. I'll let you kind of, take your time with that and do it every few years. But as I hope you take away from today, data analytics surveys, right, and different tools to understand our customer become very, very important in order to stay agile. And even if you've been in business for 40 years or you're just launching a business, agility is something that we have to be able to implement in order to be able to keep up with the changing pace of consumer behavior. And each of your consumers are likely different, right? So sometimes we say to ourselves, oh, well, we have a certain kind of customer here in the Gables, right? We have a certain kind of demographic or profile. But that's, again, just looking at specific numbers and data points. Each of your businesses are as unique as you are, right? So even if you have businesses that are similar, the reasons why your customers shop with you are going to be uniquely different, and it's very important to understand what those unique value propositions and emotions are. Okay, so what does a brand look like that actually has done this work? Right, so we're setting the stage. We're about to go into the work pretty soon. But what does a brand look like that has done this work? Well, it's a brand that has really cohesive visual assets, right? When you take a look at photography, when you take a look at their social media, it's cohesive, it's telling a narrative. It looks like copy and written language that is talking to the customer, again, cohesively across platforms. It's a website, again, that has a user experience that your customers are the most interested in engaging and that's going to get them to convert, right? Websites are not just parking spots, right? Websites are places for action to happen, even if you don't sell an e-commerce product. Do you guys have websites? Yeah. How many of you guys sell something on your website? E-com. Great. So people have websites without transactions, right? It's not a parking spot. It's very important that your website has a call to action and that it converts into something, right? Even if that is someone sending you an email or going to your Instagram page to follow you. Everything that you create needs to have an ROI and it needs to have a CTA, a call to action, and a return on investment. So companies that are doing great when it comes to brand values and when it comes to understanding their customers have really taken the time, right, to have websites that work. They have store layouts that are empathic to the needs of their customers. Have you walked into a store and walked through it and said, I think I want to shop here, but I don't know how? It happens to me all the time. I walk in and I'm like, I see these brands, I know that there's stuff in here that I want, but I don't know how to get from where I am to the register and find the things that I want to find. Yeah. So when we think about brand, when we think about the best ways to be able to be cohesive and understand our customers, it trickles down into how we actually do our storefronts. It trickles down to the layout, it trickles down to the signage, to the merchandising, to the brands that we carry. It's not just digital, it is very much physical. Right? Brands that understand their customers know the difference between the different light bulbs that they put in their stores and how it's going to affect the customer experience. You walk into a Macy's, there's a different kind of lighting than when you go into Nordstrom's or when you go into Walmart. These different kilowatts are designed in order to help you achieve, right, a certain call to action, right? Put a lot of stuff in your bag, let's get out quickly, right? Take your time and browse. Speak to a sales associate. So as you think about the customer experience, which is really what we're talking about today, it's so important that we don't just say, well, I want my visual assets to look great on digital, but when they come into my storefront, it's going to be the same status quo user experience. The way retail is changing, the way business is changing, we have a tremendous opportunity to be able to speak empathically to our customer and to be able to show that, right, through the physical world. Anyone who has an e-commerce or a digital business also understands the value of the physical space. Meaning, whether or not you are at a trade show and you're setting up a booth and you have your physical handouts and your pamphlets and you're talking to somebody, or you're actually on the job performing whatever it is you've been tasked and hired to do, right? So how we choose to comport ourselves, right? How we choose to show and tell and experience is the way in which our customers see us. Are you guys kind of with me here on this like customer experience, empathic design, design thinking principles, right? Important physical and digital. So obviously there are big brands that have cohesion, right? Normally at this point I'd be like, give me a couple big ones, and you might say like Apple, right? And Nike, right? And Uber, right? Brands that have real customer experience. But my question to you is, what is it about these brands that make them cohesive? What is it about Apple that makes us feel consistent everywhere that we go? Any ideas? Yeah.
I would say their why. That's the way they do what they do.
Yes. And how does that happen physically? How do you experience that?
Through their products,
Yep.
their visual displays,
Yep.
the customer service.
Yep. And yes.
I was going to say that if you walk into 5 different Apple stores in different parts of the country, you will find almost the identical experience. You get the smart bar in almost the same place. You get people wearing almost the same uniform. You get the setup of the tables almost the same. It's like walking into a Starbucks.
It's consistent.
Consistent, franchise-driven, required consistency of presentation.
Any other ideas on different ways? Yes.
Their Genius Bar. Because compared to Microsoft, before you have to call in for support, now they made it personal. You come into the store.
And there's a methodology to how they ask you questions, right? There's a methodology and a framework by which they are able, right, to give a consistent experience. Now, when you think about that customer experience and that customer design, right, who do you guys think is responsible for that? Is it just marketing? Is it product development? Is it the technology company that's actually producing the hardware and the software? Who is thinking about design? Does that have anything to do with the products that they're selling? Any ideas? It's a group.
People from different departments that provide the information and feedback as to what it is that the customer is looking for to give you that overall picture.
Yeah, so she was saying it's people who are finding out what the customers are looking for to give the feedback to be able to enact that. In fact, I would dare to say that when you open up your phone, right, if you have an Apple phone or any type of phone, but if you have an Apple phone, when you open it up, it just works, right? You're like, oh, customer experience, customer design, it works. You walk into the Genius Bar. Okay, I know I'm going to get this help. You go online, you know the user experience on the website, you know how you're going to find something, right? When you think about the why and how they're enacting that, it becomes very consistent. Yes. Oh. So Apple's the easiest example, right? Because Apple is pervasive, it's everywhere, we all. But what's really important here is to start to think about the ways in which we can actually see examples of this in smaller companies. It's easy to say, well, Apple does a great job because they're Apple, right? And they're big and they're massive and, they can have, this kind of corporate oversight and control over everything. But guys, as a small business, how much oversight and control do you have? Everything. Right? Can you imagine managing a team of like thousands of people versus managing a team of 5 or 2 or 1, managing yourself? Right? So when we think about the customer experience, right, or brands, or if you own your own business, right, how you are getting that customer experience across, if Apple can do it with thousands of people and create consistency and continuity and deliver something over and over again, you very well can do the same thing. And in fact, it should be a little bit easier because there's less people to manage. So I've got a couple great examples here of our clients that have done some really great customer experience. And I'm going to speak to them both in terms of visual and then give you some qualitative feedback around how this translates across the different areas of their business. So the first one here is Sugar High Love Stoned. Super groovy. They are based in Hawaii, and they're totally into the 70s love, it is super fun, it's really feminist, it's really young, it's very much Coachella, right? It's very much festival, right? And when we think about the ways in which they are getting their brand, right, across and staying consistent, it's a team of 4 people. It's a small team of people. Everything is done in-house. One of the things I hear from a lot of brand owners is, I really want to hire an outside sales team. I want someone else to do sales. I don't want to do sales, right? Sales is hard. It is hard. You guys are all in the business of selling things, right? I know it's hard. I sell things. It's hard. And I help them sell things. And when it comes to selling things, right, this is a great example. They had hired an outside showroom, right, to manage their sales. After having built a very strong and thriving business on their own, they said, we're ready to hand off sales. And I was like, oh, are you sure you want to do that? And they were like, yeah, this is going to be amazing. It's going to open us up to have more time. We're going to be able to do other things on the business. But guess what? The sales team, right, did not have the same relationship, did not speak the same language to the customer. So even though they had this stellar sales team that had a great historical record and that worked with some amazing businesses, it was less about their capacity and the intelligence to do a good job and more about how they were emotionally connecting with their existing customer base. So that's more just on the sales side, right? When we think about doing sales on the selling floor, when we think about, having a brick and mortar store and being the person who owns the company and who's on the floor selling. It's very, very important to be connected to your customer no matter how you do it. Because if you are not connected to your customer and you end up hiring an outside sales team to come in and do things for you, and they do not speak and have the same language and experience as you do, you're going to miss out, right? And your business is going to drop, and you're going to have to create a recovery strategy. On a visual standpoint, it's really easy to see how they are aesthetically aligned across all different assets, right? Their images tell a unique story. It's pretty consistent. These are from different campaigns. It's fun, it's youthful, it is of their brand. This is not to say that your brands need to look like this, but it's to say that when you do visual assets and when you understand that your customer, and in this case, goes to Coachella, right? Your customer is young, she is political, she is free, she's likely living in California, this girl. Right? When you start to think about brand and product delivery that matches your visual assets, right, you can see how this is a really compelling brand story. Another one of our clients, Keep It Wild. These guys have an amazing social give back. They organize trash cleanups and they sell product. They are connected to their customers and to people who want to be a part of their lifestyle. And what have we been doing with them? Well, recently, they've been doing a lot of focus grouping with their people. They've been starting to understand how their customers actually experience their brand. Getting one-on-one with their customers. Segmenting who they're going to get on the phone with, really based on a variety of different criteria, and we can talk about that more in terms of, how do you know who the right customer is to get on the phone with? What kinds of questions are you going to ask them? What does that need to look like? But through doing some very basic segmentation on understanding their customers, we saw their highest sales weekend, which I was like, yes, it's so great. Their highest sales weekend over 4th of July, which tripled any of their business in the last 6 months. And it wasn't because it was magic. Though I think we all want to think that way, right? Oh, it's magic. Oh, they just had a great weekend. No, it was because we sat down and said, who is our customer? How can we speak to them better? Business is great, but how can it be even better? Right? So we sat down, we performed some of these exercises that we're going to be talking about, and we were able to see some direct ROI in terms of very, very easy activities. Segmenting email lists, staging out their Instagram newsfeed posts versus their stories, versus their advertising, thinking about the communication and the cadence on those things, and delivering them with a great visual asset platform, right? Visuals have to be consistent. And you know what's really funny is what we ended up finding out is that a lot of the people that they were interviewing, right, they just love the brand because of their trash pickup program. They bought the products because it associated them to the brand. It wasn't even always about the product itself, right? They were buying into the feeling. They were buying into the experience, the customer experience and what it meant for them. Versus buying something because it happened to be the highest quality of X and it was, sourced in somewhere special. Yeah, their t-shirts are eco-friendly, but guess what? They're $30, right? And they were able to really be able to, again, maximize their profits, get a huge return on investment through understanding their customer experience a little bit better. Okay, so the things that matter to your customer are going to be different across the board. I've heard from lots of different people, how do I approach things like, sensitive environmental issues, or how do I approach things like, political issues, or how do I approach these different kinds of sensitive things, right, that are happening within our cultural climate? What kind of take do I want my company to have? How do I feel about that? And how much do I want to associate myself with that on social? Right? Or how part of that is that going to be to my brand? Well, guess what? It's different for all of you. And it's as important to understand who your customer is, but also what you believe in. As a small business, right, interfacing directly one-on-one with your customers, they are going to see and experience the authenticity of you in relationship to your brand. The rise of CEOs and the rise of employees that now have their own personal brands is very important. It's high, right? I mean, people like Elon Musk and these CEOs are getting on Twitter and responding directly to customer feedback. We can't hide behind our brands any longer. So as important as it is that we start to talk about the customer, it's also going to be very important that you start to think about how you want to relate and engage with your customer in a way that's very authentic to you. So that might be strategically, positioning yourself in a certain way. But it's very important to think about the customer and you in a dialogue together, working collaboratively as opposed to, hey, I'm going to hide behind my brand over here, and I'm going to put out all this stuff over here and all this brand communication, and I'm going to assume that my customer is just going to want to experience this brand. But no, they want to experience the people behind the business. They are as interested in your personal Instagrams, unfortunately, or fortunately, as they are in your business Instagram. So whether or not that's private or personal or open to the public, that's up to you. But it's important to know that you're inextricable from this. Right? You are a part of this equation as much as they are a part of this equation. They are purchasing from you, experiencing you, as much as you are trying to understand and service them. Okay, so now let's get into the juicy stuff. You guys have in front of you some sheets of paper. We are going to go through some of these different exercises. We're going to talk about the ways to apply them, make sure I'm good on time, the best ways to understand them. And once we kind of go through this process, I think it's going to be really important and valuable for us to be able to, have a conversation. So if you guys are like, I don't get this, I don't know what I'm doing, let's talk about it. Now, the first thing you guys have in front of you is a project plan. Now, what's interesting about this project plan is it really goes through a few different steps. Many of you guys here who are here because you want to start marketing, hopefully, I've now helped you understand that before you start marketing, it's really important to be able to actually understand who your customer is. So before we start the doingness phase of things, it's very important that we go through two other processes. Looking, right? So looking around us, understanding what's happening, assessing the situation, and synthesizing the information. Right? Before you launch any kind of Facebook ad or any type of marketing collateral, it's important for you to understand all of the different components, right, that help to make that successful. To which customer am I speaking to, right? Did I go through the looking phase? Did I do any research and understand? What were those steps? How about the synthesizing and the understanding phase? right? Do I understand what it is that I'm doing? Do I understand the data and the information I'm about to use before I go make this piece of creative or before I make this piece of advertisement? So it's important that we start to look at these kinds of project plans, that you take a look at them for yourself, and you can see at the bottom here, there's a timeline and a budget. It's actually one of the best pieces of paper in terms of understanding any type of project that you want to go into. And make sure that you start to fill things in terms of looking, understanding, and action. So today, as we go through these these materials and these tools, a lot of it's going to be on looking and information gathering, right? Understanding our customer and gathering the information. Part 2, we're going to be synthesizing and creating brand stories. Part 3 is going to be making and deploying your marketing activities. You might be like, oh boy, do I need to wait that long in order to be able to go make an ad? No, you don't, right? But having to go through these different phases before you start doing your marketing, before you start making changes to your selling floor, before you start making changes to your newsletters, right? It's important that we go through these steps. So, customer journey map. The customer journey map is similar to this customer oracle in the sense that we're going to be mapping out the different areas of the customer life, right? What is their life cycle? What are they interested in? Okay, and here's why you need to create them. I think I've made a pretty compelling case so far, but it has a lot to do with advertising, product assortment, customer service, the user experience, and the customer experience, right? This is why we need this. This should end up being a really nice cohesive document. You can share this with your employees. You can share this with your marketing people. You might be able to even use it as you're working with other people, right? Hey, let's start to go through these processes and start to habituate the way in which we understand, synthesize, and deploy information. This is going to be messy, right? So when we think about this getting messy, the big idea here is that we want to go crazy. In this concept of design thinking, we want to go far and wide. We want to get messy. We want to understand and look at a lot of things. And then once we synthesize and get a plan, we know exactly where we're going. I can't tell you how many times I've seen businesses that rush to get started and rush to launch, right? So they think they know what they're doing, and then they find out, because they didn't do this information, this research and synthesis, that now they need to go back. So what happens then? We actually spend a lot more money, and you waste a lot more time. So it becomes really important that we get messy first. We want to put all the ideas out on the table as far as who your customer is, get the data, really start to think about how to make it all make sense. And then once we understand exactly the scope of what we're doing, whether it's a marketing campaign, whether it's shifting your floor, whatever it is that we are going to be doing, we're going to have enough data points to say, I can go forth and make this happen, knowing that the probability that it's going to be wrong or that I'm going to have to change it is going to be minimal, right? We want to minimize the back and forth. Get messy, streamline. This might be long, and this will hopefully also have pictures, flow charts, and I encourage you to get creative. Certainly in the few pages that you have in front of you, this might be somewhat difficult, but as you take this home and you start to work with it a little bit more, I hope that you think creatively, especially like myself, if you've been told, yes, you are just a Microsoft Excel business person and drawing pictures is not for you. Well, I can tell you that having gone through many of these processes on my own and with clients, that drawing pictures is now for me. They're just not as pretty as other people's, but it doesn't matter, right? The goal is that we get to the actions that come out of this process. Okay, methodologies. So fundamentals of our customer, right? Customers are irrational, right? Customers do not always make decisions based on a series of logical things that we put in front of them. It's also important to understand that while customers are irrational, they will never think of themselves as being irrational. We have to understand the irrationality. We have to speak to that, which means that we are leveraging emotional drivers. Meaning, if I tell you that this little black dress is going to keep you sweat-free all night while you party all night, it's going to be a better selling proposition than like, hey, it's $25.99, buy it now. right? Speaking to things that I'm interested in or that you're interested in, as opposed to always speaking in terms of value and dollars. Because even, guys, if it is a value and dollar proposition that you're selling, the way in which you communicate and visually display that is going to be much different than something that is $500 versus $5, right? So there is a sense of design thinking as we even think about how we want to express our dollar propositions. Customers' true needs may be different than emotional needs, right? That's important to understand. And we need to commit ourselves to being empathic, learning about our customer, using the methodologies to uncover who they are and why this is important. And then really understand that sometimes your customer experience might be based on things that you have no control over. Someone walks into your store, they've had a bad day. You cannot control the fact that they've had a bad day. You cannot control, whether or not that invoice that they submitted didn't get paid. You cannot control if their son or daughter is sick at school, right? There are certain things that they walk into the experience with that you actually have zero control over. However, the way in which you craft your customer experience, right, actually helps you to deal with that, right? It allows you to be empathic. Right? It allows you to be able to speak a language that is consistent to them, right? That they understand, they feel that you are on the same side. You're not just trying to get them into a pair of socks, right? You're trying to understand who they are. And customer loyalty really comes from the consistency. So earlier we talked about the experience at Apple when you walk in there. All of you guys right now with businesses of one, at least one, you've got to have one. You should have a list of the ways in which you are consistent with your customer experience. I send out responses to emails within this amount of time frame. My emails are written like this. Now, they don't have to be quite so spelled out in terms of what the consistency looks like, but once your big business becomes outside of one and it becomes two, you now have to be able to share that information with somebody. And just telling someone isn't enough, right? They've got to have a document or something that they can actually look at in order to be able to say these are the company guidelines. So your company culture starts with you, but also your company guidelines and policies and the way that you treat the customer starts with you. And if you do not understand, right, what those methodologies and ways are that you communicate with your customer, how on earth are you ever going to have more than one person in your company that's consistent? Or how are you going to avoid the fact that when you have a bad day, you don't treat your customer a certain way because you've had a bad day? Right? We all have bad days and great days, but our customer experience should be, like Apple, consistent. So creating customer guidelines and being consistent with the ways in which we apply that is going to help the people that you are selling to and ultimately creating relationships with. It's going to help them come back over and over again because they are going to know the kind of experience they get from you. Does all that kind of make sense? Awesome. I like seeing heads that go like this. It's good. Keep it up. Okay, so what are the emotional drivers? We have a conscious experience, a rational experience. We have the emotional, subconscious, and the psychological experience, right? Now, we certainly can't hold you to be accountable for all of these different experiences, right? Because there are lots of different ways in which we cannot impact the customer. But it's important to acknowledge that these different points of rationality are real. It's important to also be self-aware to understand that when we make compulsive purchases or even well thought out purchases, that they are done for a number of different reasons. And what is the goal here? So when we think about the delivering of the right customer experience and the way in which we want people to feel about our businesses, we think about ourselves in this high performance zone. Right? We want to exceed their rational expectations, meaning, we want to have the right shopping bag. We want to make sure that, if they need to wrap up a gift, we can do that. We want to make sure that it's easy for them to book an appointment with us. I don't know how many people have service businesses, but if you can't make it easy for someone to book an appointment or to get a hold of you, on a rational level, you're just walking away from business. Right? On an irrational level, you're basically telling them, I don't care about you. right? I don't care enough about your business to make it easy in order for you to do business with me. This happens to me all the time when I walk into a store. No one comes up to me, someone doesn't greet me, they don't ask me how I'm doing, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess you just don't want my money. Right? I guess it's like, oh, you're selling all these really high-end price point goods, and you're just assuming I'm gonna walk in here and walk out spending like $20,000 and without getting a customer experience. So when we think about how this makes sense and how you employ this rationally and irrationally, on the rational level, it comes to really having the basic fundamentals and tools, right, that a customer needs and wants when they want to do business with you. The question I'd ask yourself is, how easy is it for someone to do business with you? Right? When you go onto your website or walk your sales floor or even get on the phone with someone, do you make it easy for them to give you their money? Or do you make it difficult? Right? In what ways can you actually make it easier for someone to hand over those dollars? Right? So when you think about that basic rational experience, and then of course irrational, which has to do with a lot of the emotions and drivers and feelings we've been talking about. Okay, so now let's do it. You guys have a pen in front of you? Pens? No? Maybe we can share. All right. So you have in front of you this project plan, right? The first part of this project plan is let's look, right, before we understand. So today, as part of looking, we are talking about a stakeholder map. Now, there is no example of a stakeholder map or a template because, as you can see, it can look like that. Again, difficult to achieve in a few-minute period of time. But when we think about, everyone have pens? Awesome, okay. So when we think about creating stakeholder maps and when we think about creating the customer experience, one of the biggest things I want to ask people is who engages with your business? Now, it might not always be the person who is purchasing the product, might not be the end user of the product. In the case of children's clothes, is it that the kids are walking in with credit cards and buying everything? Sometimes, yeah. Okay, maybe that's a bad example. But I imagine those credit cards come from someone, right? I imagine that they're not opening up their own bank accounts at the age of 10. So when we think about who the actual customer is, it's important that we think about all of the stakeholders within the entire ecosystem of who's experiencing your business. The person who's looking might be the person who's browsing, who might be the person who's telling someone else, hey, I'm helping you to inform your purchasing. Right? And then that person who's being informed is then maybe making the purchase on behalf of someone else. So it's really important to understand where the dollars come from, but also all the other people in this process. Right? You have your lookers, your browsers, you have the people who are going to convert today, the people who convert in a month, in a week. You also have the vendors and suppliers that you work with that, again, could also become customers of yours. You're certainly customers of theirs. So when we start to think about the stakeholders, right, within an ecosystem, it becomes really important for us to ask ourselves, well, who are all of the different people and touch points that are experiencing our business? You know, here in the city, right, we have the tourists who are coming in who are experiencing, right? We also have people who own businesses, right? We have the people who are residents here. We have different kinds of residents, right? So when you think about your own ecosystem, it's important to say to yourself, all right, I have a restaurant, so who are my stakeholders? Well, I have this entire kitchen staff. I have the customers who might actually be seeing or engaging or experiencing with them. I have the people in the front of house, I have back of house, I have all of my vendors and suppliers. Your stakeholders are huge. Now today, for this purpose, we're understanding kind of the transactional process and flow. However, to really fully optimize your business over time, I would highly suggest that you take today's applications and what we're talking about and apply them to the different areas of your company. Today, of course, is focused on the people who are spending and who those decision makers are in that process. But when you think about stakeholders, right? Really think about, who is doing the looking, who is doing the browsing? Are they purchasing on behalf of someone else? Am I a wedding planner? And so I am looking at a lot of different vendors, but ultimately I'm actually creating an assortment of purchases for the people who are getting married, right? Where do you fit within this ecosystem of stakeholder mapping? And who are the different touch points and where are they and how do you engage with them? This is an exercise that you can do on your own. It's also really, really fun if you have a partner who's also in your business or someone who's intimate with your business to help you dream about it and think about it too. The reason why is sometimes we think different people really have more or less importance, right? And when you start to sync up your ideas with other people, you start to say, oh, we all agree that this is the person or this is the chain that we want to be affecting. We all agree that we want to be focusing on the person who's browsing and looking based on a conversation that you've had with, say, someone else, right? Obviously, when you're looking at this information yourself, it can be a little bit difficult to say, is that correct? Or, am I getting this the right way? And I'm very much looking forward this afternoon to be working on this with many of you guys in terms of, understanding who these stakeholders are, right? Exactly how are we going to be affecting them? So this gets messy. We talked about messy. This requires Post-its. It requires pens. It requires, getting a little bit visual with things. You can certainly draw this. So if you guys are starting to have ideas of, who these people are, I encourage you to start taking notes because you don't want to miss out on any good vibe energy from the customer service gods and the experience gods to help you make a better customer experience. But it's important for us to get big and wide and start to think about this in terms of multiple different spider webs. Any questions about stakeholder mapping as it relates to your business or anything in general? Awesome. All right, cool. So stakeholder mapping, super applicable to any situation, any business, whether this is your first business, you're working on another business, whatever it is, stakeholder mapping really helps to identify who those key customers are and people are that we want to be impacting. Now, the next big methodology here is one of interviewing. Now, you guys have a sheet of paper in front of you that really helps you understand, it's kind of a nice guideline and example for ways of doing interviewing. Paper shuffling, I like it. So when you think about interviewing, it's important for us to start to ask ourselves, what are the different key questions and how do we want to approach these people we want information from? Now, once you have your stakeholder map and you identify the key people and persons that you want to be speaking to, it's then important that we ask ourselves, well, what kind of information do we want to extract? Right? Do we want to be finding out from them things like, how their last purchase was, what their experience was like the last time they walked into an XYZ kind of store, or what brought them into the store today, or the last time they purchased? Start by making a list of about 10 to 15 questions of things that you would ideally like to ask your existing customer. Now, this also applies to a customer that you don't have. Sometimes we get shy and we say, well, I'm starting this thing. I know I need to do market research. I know I need to talk to people, but I don't know how, or I don't know who to talk to, right? I don't know how to get in front of the right people. And so when it comes to finding those people, obviously we know that our existing customer base is pretty easy to tap into. But how do you talk to people who you don't know? Any ideas? Yes. Great example. Other ideas? Pardon? You can purchase a database. That is another great example. Any others? Social media. That's a good one. Anything else? Pardon? Yeah, through people that you don't. Though friends and family, guys, they're usually liars. Not because they don't love you, because they love you too much, because they actually are so committed to you being happy, right? So on the irrational part, and on the rational side, you're like, guys, I'm about to spend like $50,000. I need the rational help here, not the fact that you love me so much, you want me to do well, and you're going to give me the answers I want. So friends and family, not so great. But yes, through other people who you do know, right? So through sending out surveys or networks, yes. Word of mouth is a great idea. Anything else? To who? So people you don't know, right? So when we think about sending an email blast, right? How would you send an email blast to people you don't know?
We would have a form on your website once it'll go up. Sign up.
It's a great answer. Good. On the spot. I like it. Yes.
We cultivate everyone's email address, whether we get hired or not. So we
Great.
have a database of inquiries. And those
Yes.
are people that we don't know because they didn't follow through and hire us and become a client.
Yes. We're going to talk about that. That's like a gem. Please write that down. Yes. Creating events. Yes. Anything else? We got some really good ideas. Those of you guys who are like, I don't know how to talk to my customer because I don't have one. These are all really good ideas on ways to talk to your customer, right? Or your potential customer, right? But the idea or the notion that you would spend time and energy to do something without even knowing if people want it, need it on a rational level, but also how they're feeling about it, right? And what are the ways in which they want to engage with it on an irrational level, right? Is almost like, it's like telling someone, yeah, go jump off this thing, but don't set it up and get a bungee cord and, like make it safe and easy and really enhance your chances of success, right? So when we think about businesses and their success rate, right, the success really comes from empathic design and understanding of your customer. And then it really applies to your price points. Anyway, back to what I said earlier. But when it comes to interviewing, right, interviewing is one of my favorite ways of getting people's thoughts and opinions. It can be done in really casual ways. It can be done in ways that don't have to be so formal. It doesn't need to be, hey, I need 30 minutes of your time. It can actually be like really fast and short, and it can be done often. Right? And when we think about interviewing, I love the idea of using social. I love aggregating information through events, through having places on your website where you can actually track people who are becoming customers and not. Because guys, there's a reason why someone is not your customer. You just don't know why. And if you take the time to interview someone who is not your customer, you will find out why they are not your customer. And you may say to yourself, oh, that's great. I actually don't want them as a customer. Or, I do want them as a customer, and here's how I pivot and change my communication in my business in order to be able to get more people like that. Right? It is not always our goal to be able to service everybody. Right? Like we don't have the capacities often. Maybe we have some Apple people in here who are like, yes, I'm ready. I got like $100 million and I want to be the everything to everybody. But even still, Apple is not for everyone. Their phones are expensive. Right? They are not everything to everybody. And so as we think about who we want to be, we have to think about who we want to be for our customer. We need to find out, and interviewing is a great way to do that. So on this document here, we've got a couple frameworks and ways of being able to articulate that. You definitely want to introduce yourself to the person who you are interviewing. I always love to do, when I do interviews, I always like to say, hey, let's be candid here. The more honest you are, good and bad, the better it is for me. Right? Give them permission to be honest. Sometimes people, when they're being interviewed or you're asking them questions, they so desperately want to give you the right answers. They want to feel like they're doing a good job. Right? But it's not about them doing a good job, right? It's actually about them sharing with you exactly how they feel and what they're thinking. And it's important to give them permission. Right? Because then they're going to be more open. And guess what? You're going to then be able to make a better business decision off of that. So no matter the place that you are getting people's information from, you definitely don't want to spring an interview on someone. Hey, you're at this party having a glass of wine. You want to interview? Right? It's not necessarily the most appropriate place. But you do want to have interviewing as part of something that you do, let's say, on a quarterly basis. Maybe you cherry pick 10 of your customers. Maybe you cherry pick 10 people who are not your customers. Get a temperature check. Find out what's going on in their lives. Find out what's going on, when was the last purchase that they made. Make the questions really relevant. Make sure those questions are open-ended, right? The more that they're talking, the better. Yes?
Do you always do these live, or do you do them with a form or email?
Phone is good. Live is even better. Surveys are a different methodology. Surveys and things that you are more removed, right? They don't allow you to take note when someone pauses to think. You need to be able to connect. Good point. So surveys are great. You should have surveys. You should be implementing customer feedback surveys. For any person who's purchased something, they should get a survey. Right? And the reason why that's important is you're going to get more big data, right? When we talk about looking at big data, we talk about understanding analytics. That's important. But this is more one-on-one. This is connection. This is being able to say, oh, when I asked this person about the last thing they bought, or when I asked them about how they decided to buy their coffee this morning and they stopped for 5 minutes to think about that answer to that question, I wonder what that's about. And you might change your line of questioning based on the pause in the conversation. One of my favorite questions to ask is, what would you like your experience to be of blah, 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 blah. Right? What would you like your experience to be? It's not saying rate your last experience. It's not saying write a Yelp review. It's a lot of pressure. It's saying, what would you like your experience to be when you are hiring a photographer for your next photo shoot? Oh, I really would love for it to be easy. I'd love to know that everything is on this document, that it's super, I know where they're going to be, that there's communication. I'd love if, this last thing happened this other time. And man, I really was hoping that it would be better this time. And when you ask someone to think about their experience and how they want it to be, you're projecting them into a future experience of an ideal version of whatever that is. I told you a few minutes ago about walking into a store and not being greeted by employees. Well, then that might just tell somebody, okay, tell all of my customer service people to greet all of the people. Right? That's an example of saying, let me do an exact action based on some feedback. As opposed to saying, well, Shama, what would you like your experience to be when you go shopping? I'd be like, well, guys, I'd really love it when I walked into a store if the lighting was great and the mirrors looked amazing. And every time I walked in front of a mirror, I was like, this is the best mirror ever, right? Oh, these clothes look amazing on me. That's a different way of understanding a customer experience. That wasn't me telling you about what sucked the last time. This is me telling you about a projection into the future of how I would like for things to be. And what does that inform you to do? Well, it informs you to look into lighting and mirrors, right? Something that may not have come if you would just asked me about my last experience. So when we start to think about the ways in which we ask questions, right, it becomes really important that we ask ourselves about the future experience of that person. Let's say you are doing adventure experiences and you are putting people on vacations. Well, how would you like the experience of your next vacation to be? Or the planning of your next vacation experience to be? Oh, well, I really wish I was able to aggregate all these different data sources. I wish it was really easy for me to store my customer information and so I could find everything all at once. I really wish all the airlines talked to each other. We can't do everything, right? So the fact, we can't make all the airlines talk to each other, but we might be able to create and get an idea for creating a customer center or a hub on our website that allows them to store all their data and information so they can easily access that. It might give you a whole new product idea or business idea that you never even thought about. So asking the right questions and interviewing, right, and knowing how to get people to share their dreams and desires and what they want with you is so important, right? We need to ask permission, obviously. Personally, I think it's always great to record things, Whenever I do interviews on the phone, I use a conference line called Uber Conference because it just automatically records everything. And it's great. And then I can store it and I can listen to it later. Or I can have it transcribed, right? I'll use a service like SpeechPad to have it transcribed. So when we think about the interviewing process, right, when we think about asking the right questions, do any of you guys have any other ideas about the kinds of questions or things that we should be finding out about? Yes.
Well, one of the things that the questions, when I do research for campaigns, it's not even so much what the question is, but the words that the customer uses to describe it, so their tribal language. So it doesn't even matter, just the words that they use, then when you craft your messaging, you use their language and it resonates.
Exactly. Did you guys get that? That's like, you kind of stole my thunder. No, it's great. It's perfect. It's exactly true, right? You hear what people say, and you reverberate it back to them, and they feel like you're speaking their language, and they shop with you, and they buy from you, and they support your causes, and they click on that ad on the Facebook ad, right? Or they show up to the event, right? So speaking their language, very important to take note of that. Any other thoughts on this? Yes.
Oftentimes, once we're actually hired for a service, we do a questionnaire, which will ask questions such as, what did you like about us? And also, what didn't you like about us? And what didn't you like about other businesses you saw?
Love that. Love that. Getting better understanding of ideas on your competitors. Yes.
I usually ask my customers that if this is the first time that they are at the restaurant, or how do they find out about us?
That's amazing. And I also think, what did you love about your experience today? Sometimes we're so focused on the things that we want people to tell us that they don't like, because we want to get the negative feedback. But trust me, negative feedback will come. People, when they feel something negative, you will know. Unless it's like an overly abundant positive experience that they really have to share on social, they may not share it, right? Unless you ask. Yes.
Did you do research about other companies before coming to us?
Yes.
Why did you end up choosing us?
Yes, I think that's a great idea. Again, understanding more about your competitors. I think that's really important, especially if they decided to purchase from you. I think that it's really, sometimes it's very simple, right? They just found you online. And you're like, yes, SEO, keep doing that, right? It's like these are ways of being able to know what is working, right? So interviewing is great. You had a thought.
In terms of the amount of questions you ask,
Short. 5. Keep it short. People don't have a lot of time. But if they like you, they will stay on the phone with you. So give yourself time, right? So you might say to yourself, I'm going to book 30 minutes to do, one customer interview. Again, you should be doing 10 of these like every month. It's important that this becomes habituated, right? Because once you guys get this information, my next question is, where does it go? Database, yeah. It goes to databases, it goes to a customer relationship management software. On the most basic level, it goes to a Google spreadsheet, right? We don't have to get too fancy, right? But it's got to go somewhere. So think about not just performing these interviews, but taking notes and putting them somewhere else in a way that if someone else were to read your notes, if I were to read your notes, right, would I be able to understand what happened? Right? Really, really important ways of understanding how to improve, right? Or even how to create something for somebody else. Empathic design. Persona profiles. You guys all have this in your document list as well. When we think about persona profiles, right, it's important that as we do the interviewing process, let's say we segment who we're interviewing. We want our most high net worth customers that we're going to interview. We also want to interview the people who don't buy from us. We also want to interview potential customers, right? And at the end of the day, we have to pick one, right? We're not exactly full of teams of hundreds of people where we can improve customer experience and understand our customer profile for everyone and do everything at once, right? We've got to pick one. And who we decide to pick is going to be the person who ends up on our customer profile. And maybe we have 3 customer profiles or 5, right? However many that you can actually impact change on, right? That's really important. There are so many things that we can be doing to make improvements and to innovate and to make changes, but we have to ask ourselves about our bandwidth. I would say for a small business, looking at 3 is probably a good place to start. Looking at the customer profile of your customers that have the highest, best lifetime value, right? They're shoppers, they love you. These are your gold mines, right? These are the people who we want to understand their hopes and dreams and aspirations because we know that we've already been delivering to them. We know that when we make it better, they will continue to be brand advocates, right? So we really want those big purchasers. We also want the people who are not purchasers, but who had experienced our company. We want to understand thoroughly who this customer is so that we know whether or not we want them or not. When we think about, experience diagramming, and we're going to get to that in a second, but when we think about their experience of their life, maybe we actually don't want to be part of that experience. And guess what? That's okay. I give you permission to walk away from the customers that you don't want in order to get more of the customers you do want. And given that not in this talk, but in the future ones, we'll be talking about activations and implementation. Trust me, lots of ways to get in front of your customer. This conversation is not about the doingness. This conversation is about the understandingness, right? The hearing, the synthesis of your data and information. So it's important to say, who are these customers who are not a part of our experience? Do we want them? Do we not want them? Right? Let's evaluate. Let's figure out who they are first. So creating a customer profile to really understand if there are consistent, right? Let's say you go through your interviewing process and you're like, oh, these things are really consistent. The people who don't purchase from us seem to have all of these same qualities. That's interesting. Let's put that together and let's have our customer profile on who this person is so we can evaluate that later and decide what we want to do about that. Right? So your customers who purchase a lot, the ones who are, not purchasing, right? And then we also have the customers who you want, the aspirational customer. They haven't found you yet. They don't know who you are. You have an opportunity to really make a great first impression. We want to know who they are, what they want, and how we can speak to them and eventually make it very easy for them to hand us over their money. Yay! Right? That's what we want when we find out about that aspirational customer for us, right? We need to do that kind of outbound research and get in front of people who don't know us already. Does the persona profiles make sense? Do you have any questions about this and creating this? Awesome. Okay, great.
I have a question.
Yes.
So the idea of going back to your data and checking it because people change, do we go back to that same customer profile and check to see how they have evolved?
Exactly. You go back to interviewing, right? So you go...
To the same one that we already interviewed?
Yes. Yeah, so what I would do is I would take a look. So your aspirational customers will always change, right? Because our hope is that we convert them, right? So the aspirational customers, whoever those people are we've talked to, now that we've created this new, customer segmentation and activation to get them into the fold, now there are going to be other people who we don't know who become aspirational customers. Your high net worth individuals, right? Well, those might change over time, right? The ones who are purchasing with you the most frequent, right? Maybe they stay really strong and loyal to you for 3 years, but then we need to go back and find other people, right? Because maybe they dropped off for some other reason. So your data sets should evolve and change. And it's a really great idea to have your customer profiles. You can keep them in your archives as far as understanding how they've evolved over time. But your customers will evolve. So the same psychological drivers that are attracting them to you today might be very different in a year or two from now. Was that clear? Yeah. Any questions about the profiles? They're really fun and exciting to put together. Yes.
How many interviews make up a profile?
It's a really great question. I would say you definitely want to have at least 10 people for a profile. Yeah, I would say more if possible. But again, it's segmenting. So when I talked about Keep It Wild and we were talking about how we can drive and make more sales, I was like, okay, guys, this is like such easy low-hanging fruit. This is all really easy to do because it just takes you, right? We're not talking about like hiring other things. This is all stuff you can do. I was like, okay, let's get your high net worth people, right? People who are purchasing from you a lot. Let's segment and talk to them. They said, okay, we have the bandwidth to do 25. I was like, that's amazing. No less than 10, right? But as much as you can do. But a lot of it's segmenting, right? So for example, if you want to find out those people who are, let's say you want to improve your experience on your website and you want more people to purchase from your newsletter. It's a really good question, right? Well, I might look at my newsletter list and I might say to myself, well, who are the people who are actually purchasing from my newsletter? How do I capture them? Maybe I need to talk to them and get a persona profile, right, for people who purchase a lot from our newsletter. Maybe our newsletter needs to be tailored more to the people who are purchasing from it. Or maybe we have another call to action. Maybe we want them to come to the event and RSVP. So maybe we need to find out what makes this person actually RSVP to this event, right? So I think it's important that we ask the right questions. Right? We are giving very specific examples about conversion and purchasing, right? Because again, we're talking about people who are purchasing from us, but ultimately you can ask almost any question and run through these scenarios and these methods in order to be able to get the right answer. All too often, we like to skip to the end because we've been told of some answer to the problem that is somehow in some blog post or, someone saying do this, do that. But really, the whole point of this is to make your actions and what you do really specific to your company and to your customer, right? We're not just taking blanketed things and just copying and pasting them. Did that kind of answer your question? Awesome. Okay, experience diagramming. This is so much fun. This kind of really helps us to build on the persona profiles. Now, you guys all have copies of different ways in order to do experience diagramming. You certainly don't have to do all of them, but it's a great example in case there's one that is a little bit more applicable to your business or to your customer. So when we think about experience diagramming, we look at the 24-hour clock. Right? So what is their life cycle like? Are they coming to me for coffee in the morning? Are they coming to the coffee shop for meetings, right? Where does my product or my brand fit into the life cycle of this particular customer, right? When we think about things like, the physical map, so where are they, right? Or when someone walks into our store, where are they going, right? How are they shopping? Right? We can start to look at the experience diagramming as really a simple way to apply ideas of how they are going through their life and the roles in which they are engaging with our business and our brand. So other examples of that would be, looking at the people, places, and things, right? Who else is our customer engaging with? What other places are they going to? What other brands are they buying? Really important stuff. Last time I was here, we talked so much about digital marketing, and it's so exciting because I'm so passionate about this. And one of the big things was, okay, well, we're all trying to do Facebook ads, right? But are we even thinking about the other brands that they buy? Right? We so focus on a particular niche that we forget that this one particular product or service that we're selling actually fits into a cohesive life of a customer. Just like we all exist here in this room today, we also exist behind our computers. We also exist when we go out to dinner, right? Our lives are very dynamic. And when we think about the other touch points of our customers, it's important to understand what the other touch points are. Another great example. I don't know if you guys have seen this lately, but or have been familiar with this, but a lot of brands these days are doing advertising in more traditional ways. These days, now when we think about digital marketing, that's kind of the more traditional way when people think about advertising. People are now starting to do advertising in catalog mailers. They're starting to do advertising in postcards. Advertising on a subway is a really good idea if you're in New York City or any other metropolitan place where people are on the subway or on the bus. Right? When we think about how we get in front of our customer and the experiences, the people, places, and things, it's very important for us to figure out, right, where else do they exist? And so we need to map that. Right? We need to map the customer experience so it actually helps to inform us and give us better ideas of how to apply that to advertising and marketing in part 2 and 3 of our workshop. But it's important, yes.
So how would you find out other different brands as your customers?
Do you remember like 2 slides ago? Yes, interviewing, but also surveys, right? When we talk about all the different methodologies and ways of getting information from people, you want to find out and ask, right? You want to ask. Now, it used to be that people would do traditional, and this is now going back to the beginning of our lovely engagement today, 25 to 35, they drive this car, they live here, they make this amount of money. But are we taking into consideration if they use Uber or Lyft? Right? Are we really looking at the other kinds of services that they're using? Right? It's important that we start to think about lifestyle and cohort planning based on the things that they actually engage with. Some people will go to Starbucks and some people will refuse to go to Starbucks. Who is your customer? Are they the one who's going to be excited when you do, let's say you host an event and you have it be a breakfast event and you bring in the coffee shop that's local because people love that brand and your customer loves that brand? Or are they interested in another kind of brand collaboration? Again, all of these things really help to inform partnerships, planning, advertising budgets, right? What else when they walk into your store, what other shopping bags are in their hands? Right? Are their shopping bags saying one thing, but they're actually telling you like, oh yeah, I just went to J. Crew to buy everything, but I go to these stores in order to pick up my special things. Right? Sometimes the shopping bags don't say everything. Right? So again, going back to irrational and rational, right? If we just look and see on a very surface level, we get one set of data points. If we go a little bit deeper and ask the right questions to get more information, we can start to map out a different kind of experience that is more like your customer. Yes?
How do you separate, like when you ask somebody, you have to ask in a particular way to get a realistic, truthful answer. If you ask me what I do, I'll tell you, all right, it's not that exciting. If you ask me in my mind, like what I do is a little different from what actually happens. Like in my mind, I wake up Saturday morning and go to the beach. In reality, that only happens a couple times a year. So I would purchase based on that couple times a year. That's where my head's at.
Sure.
But I'm really making breakfast for cousins and little kids or whatever.
It's a great question. It's separating fact from fiction, right? It's like, yeah. So a lot of that actually comes from asking the right questions in terms of getting it to be more open-ended, right? So when you ask someone, what do you do, right? I would say that that's an answer that's going to be very you could say that in 3 sentences, right? If you ask someone, what they'd like their experience to be of their Saturday mornings, they'll tell you aspirationally what they would really like. If you tell them, that's where you can sell. It's aspirational. Even if you're selling someone something that's on sale or your product is very entry level or it's a low price point, you're not selling it to them because it's cheap. You're selling it to them because they're thinking about spending their money in other places. Right? Someone said something back there. Yes?
Whether you're gathering your information by interviewing or surveys, survey monkey type of thing, or paid shopper, how do you encourage enough of a database to give you truthful answers that the answers are meaningful, that the aggregate is meaningful? I mean, how do you I get requests for surveys, and I get people calling me, and even places where I've shopped or vendors that I've used ask me for surveys, and I don't have time, I delete. How does my vendor encourage me respond accurately, spend the time that you need to answer the survey.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, I mean, it can be as simple as, well, you can do, yeah, you can do reward. I mean, so now, okay, let's talk a little bit more specific about different ways of getting engagement. So when we're talking about interviewing someone, it's more about like, hey, I really would value your opinion. Do you have a few minutes to get on the phone with me? Right? And actually, when you come at it as a person, and not as like, hey, I'm from this company and your time is valued. And so there's an empathic standpoint to that, right? So interviewing and getting on the phone and speaking to someone face to face is so much more empathic, and you're gonna get way better answers, right? Now, when it comes to the other levels of getting data, right? The further away you are from your customer, the more you're going to have to entice them, because the less number of people are going to respond, right? So when you think about loyalty points, you think about rewards, you think about raffles, you think about some kind of collaborative giveaway with multiple companies, because you guys are looking collaboratively to get information about a particular kind of customer. Really good idea. There are different incentives that you can definitely propose. I think that surveys in general, like just email marketing surveys, really, if you were just to, let's say, go on Experian, right, and purchase a list of customers and send them out a survey, right, you would have to make sure, and again, when you're purchasing lists, they become very expensive, right, because especially if you want to target the right customer, right, so you're going to want to incentivize them with a cash incentive. The most common are Starbucks gift cards, right, and like iTunes gift cards and Target, right? Those are the most, and Amazon, right? So when you think about transactional, I would say that's great. But for you guys here who are dealing with like a customer base that is emotional and intuitive, and that you have probably an easier way of getting in front of, right? Don't try to remove yourself away from them as much as possible. The whole point of today's conversation is, how do we get closer to them? Right? How do we know them better, right? How do we create experience for them that is really able to be activated through what we are creating for them? As business owners, we create businesses for ourselves, for financial freedom, for independence, to be able to create something, to be able to put something in this earth that is of our own desire is a tremendous gift, right? And we've all given ourselves that gift. And it also requires that we have a customer because without them, we don't exist, right? So the closer that we can get to our customer, the better off our businesses will be, right? They'll be more empathic. We design better products. We can price them better. We'll know when to make a sale or put things on markdown. We'll know how to write better emails. Our visual assets will be more consistent because we know what they're looking at. Did that answer that? Yeah, great. Okay, so now let's understand analytics. Oh boy, I know we always run out of time, you guys. I'm gonna do my best to be brief. Okay, so you guys have in front of you all sorts of this kind of ethnographic research, right? That's what we call it. You're getting in front of your customer, you're understanding things, you're doing a lot of heavy lifting, you're getting on the phone, you're, taking Hall's cough drops because you've been on the phone and you're out there and, life is great. However, there is a whole lot of analytics and back-end stuff. Now, this stuff you guys can do behind your computer at your desk, and this is a great way to understand really how to match all of this kind of firsthand experience of your customer with really what the data is telling you. Right? And this is very, very valuable. So when we think about understanding your analytics, we think about Google Analytics. Do you guys all know Google Analytics? Yes? If you don't know, now you know, and now you have to find out more. Google Analytics is the best thing, right, in order to understand how people are coming to your website. It's the best way to understand how they're navigating through your site, whether or not you're selling a product transactionally on e-commerce or not. You need to have Google Analytics if you have a website. Very, very important. Your behavior flow on your site tells you exactly the pages you need to work on based on behavior flow, based on the bounce rate, based on heat mapping. Google Analytics is one of my favorite tools, and it's free. So if you don't know, now you know. Please, if you have a website, it is your duty to integrate and sign up for Google Analytics. We're also going to be talking about Shopify Analytics. Newsletter data is another place in order to understand click-through, open rates, how people are navigating and using your newsletter, so that's very important. Social media analytics, so those of you guys who have business Facebook accounts and business Instagram accounts, another great place to get analytics. One little side note here, having a Facebook page for your business is very different than signing up on business.facebook.com and actually having a business account. Yes, right? Yes. Learn the hard way, huh? Yes. No, you learned the easy way. You did it the right way the first time. Oh, good. So business.facebook.com is where you need to go. Even if you have a business page now, please, without further ado, after today, go to business.facebook.com, convert that into an actual business page so you can take advantage of the analytics and all the data that's there. We also have POS and sales data. So obviously your POS systems and understanding your POS systems, very important. In-store, so data that comes from cameras and heat mapping. And we also have other kinds of data like surveys, right? So surveys for me, and the way we think about it at Scaling Retail, is very much in the data analytics piece, as opposed to kind of that one-on-one customer exchange and customer interviewing. Customer surveys, distribute them on autopilot, right? So if you have a survey, you want to implement that, send it out frequently, right? Make sure it comes after every sale. Make sure it comes after anytime someone signs up for your newsletter, right? It's very, very important that your surveys become a habitual part of your customer relationship process. And then optimize your opt-in forms to capture more data online. So those of you guys who are looking at creating data centers and getting people's information, have different opt-in forms for different pages of your website. How do we implement that? Well, on the Scaling Retail website, for different blog posts that we have different opt-in forms. And guess what? Some really work, and some they don't. But how would I know that? Because I did it, and we do it all the time, right? So the only way to know if something is going to work and what's going to convert and where your customer is at is by doing it and doing it often, right? So habituate these types of things. So what to look for in analytics? We are looking for the purchasing time of day, right? We are looking for the quantity, so what they are purchasing, dollars and units. We're looking for any kind of trends in terms of, again, purchasing or behavior flow, so anything that we can aggregate and see a trend flow over time. We're also looking at location. Where are they coming from on your website? Where are they coming from in your store? Right? It's important to understand how people are finding you, but also where do they live? Because to go back to this question of how do we speak the same language, well, people who live in different places speak different languages. The slang is different. What's important to them is different. What's important to someone right now, here, is going to be different than what's important to someone in Portland, Oregon. And if you have a lot of traffic coming in from Portland, then you might want to segment your newsletter to people in Portland and have a different one for people here in Coral Gables, right? Go ahead. Yeah, A/B split testing, absolutely. So we want to look at the increased foot traffic. Where are people walking around, right, in your store? So foot traffic. We're also looking for online traffic and behavior flow. So what pages are they going to? How often? Where are they bouncing off from? Where do they go to next? And then lastly, guys, the big one here is conversion, right? Conversion does not always mean that they convert into buying something. When you look at setting up conversion goals on your analytics, it's very important to understand that conversion can mean anything. Conversion can mean how many people sign up for an appointment, right? How many people actually end up, putting in their newsletter, etc. Are we running out of time? Okay. Sorry, guys. I got to blow through this real fast. Okay, so when we think about software and systems to know, so these are just a few I'm going to list off. You guys can feel free to look at them a little bit more in depth. Traffic counters for your stores. So in store, understanding people who are walking in, what time of day. Company is called TrafSys. Explore with floor sensors that track people's movement. So Scanalytics, it's like $20 to $1,000 a month. If you have a brick and mortar store, you want to understand not just how many people are coming in at what time of day, but where are they going in your store, right? Very important. Are they going somewhere and then not purchasing from that area? Or are they going there and purchasing? Or maybe it's the thing by the counter that they keep buying, right? So it's important to understand. I cannot tell you about your particular business, but I can tell you that you need to know this about your particular business. Other companies that do this, Prism, Vendalytics, and then data analytic aggregators. So when it comes to understanding, like pulling in social and pulling in your sales and pulling in Google Analytics, right? Sometimes there are a lot of different data points in order to get analytics and to be able to synthesize that. So companies like Domo and Tableau, these companies are great because they help you to aggregate your data points from lots of different places. Otherwise, you might end up with like a stack of reports and you're like, okay, analysis paralysis. How do I pick and choose what information I need to analyze, or how do I see overarching trends? So definitely, depending on the size of your business right now, you may be perfectly happy with looking at your Google Analytics, or you might be actually ready to scale up and look at different data sets, and you might need something like Sumall or Springbot or Domo to be able to help pull the information together so it's synthesized in one spot. Okay, other software and systems to know. So POS systems. Obviously, you guys know about Shopify POS. It's one of my favorites, but I think it's great because you can use it both in-store and online, right? So it's really great in terms of shared inventory sources. Lightspeed, Microsoft Dynamics, Vend, and Revel systems, also really great POS systems in order to better understand your customer shopping habits. Again, guys, I think if you're looking to really build omni-channel, I think Lightspeed's great. I also think Shopify is super for that because they actually have really great mobile POS systems. Analyze. So use your analytics for better customer service, making smarter inventory decisions, right? So what do we have on hand? What do we need to sell through? What's the sell through on a weekly basis? I can't tell you how many times I have clients who are like, yeah, this did really well. Well, what was the sell through? I don't know. How many weeks of supply do you have left? I don't know. So yeah, you might know what's happening, but can you tell me? Do you have the numbers? Can you back it up? Are your decisions emotional? Are they irrational? Or are they rational, and are they based on data, and are they based on what your customers are saying? Okay, so put it all together. So now who's your customer? And this is luckily the final slide. So when you think about putting it all together, now that we've gone through this entire process, right? We've now started off with methodologies, how we're going to implement this research, the different places to get your analytics, the different ways to now start to line up all your data points. Now we put this back together in your customer oracle. Right now we have the data. The data just didn't come from us sitting down and writing journal entries on our customer. Right? It came from actual places and people and points of sale and systems that actually told us about our customer. So what is now important to them? Where are they shopping? What drives them? How do they speak? What are their concerns? How do they rationalize their purchases? What kinds of communications do we now need to implement? And lastly, where does your business fit into their life? All right, questions. Yes. Do you guys have any questions? Yes.
One of your earlier slides talked about mapping your constituencies or your
Yes.
stakeholders.
Yes.
What is the difference between the map and a list?
It's more of like a mental framework, right? So when you think about who the people are and what their concerns are, it's likely that people's lives are not so linear, right? When you think about your own life, you're probably analyzing family. There's like a whole bunch of stuff that goes, you're here. Family's like here, work goes here, your personal life, your gym and how your health. And so when you think about our ecosystems, right? Ecosystems aren't linear. So when we think about visually mapping something or experiencing it, it's important that we don't try to make something fit into a framework that we think it's supposed to fit into, really. It's really for us to be able to think more expansively about the ecosystem as opposed to my customer does this, and then they do this, and then they do that, right? It just doesn't work like that, right? This is more realistic.
But can this, my specific question is, can this be like a Venn diagram?
Oh, yeah, 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 I like that. Any other questions, thoughts, and ideas? Yes.
With social media platforms, out of there's so many, how do you decide who's the best?
Yeah, where is your customer? So tell me, who is your customer? Now it's a loaded question. I mean, you may not want to answer that. But where is your customer? Where do they go? Great. So you need to be on LinkedIn. Where else are they? Someone on LinkedIn may not be on Snapchat, but but your customer is probably on Snapchat. Where else is your customer? Okay, great. So what I would say, right, first of all, we need to find out. What I really, really discourage businesses from doing is saying, well, this is the new trend in social media, and we need to be everywhere. You don't. I give you permission. Be only where your customers are. Those are the only platforms and channels worth investing in. Being on LinkedIn, so valuable. And it's a very different kind of communication and a very different way of speaking to someone than if they're on Snapchat. Or even your customer that's also on Facebook. When I go to LinkedIn or someone goes to LinkedIn, it's to find their peers. It's to be educated. It's to learn about things. It's really professional, right? So when I speak to someone on LinkedIn, it's likely to be, for myself on a personal level, to share knowledge, to speak with my peer group. Now, if I'm on Facebook, right, it's different. It's to share highlights from my personal life, right? So when you think about yourself as your customer, if you are your customer, think about really empathically, right? Do I want to sell someone a pair of shoes on LinkedIn when they're trying to find a job? Not unless those shoes are like, we tested these shoes and 95% of women who wore these shoes landed the dream job of their life. Call that stretch marketing. But, you know, it could work possibly, right? So think about your platform and your customer and adapt your content to them. Any other questions, guys? Yes.
Not a question, just one thing I heard, and again, maybe you don't have to do this, but whenever a new trend comes out, you don't have to necessarily engage in it, but reserve your name or your business
Yes.
so that you own that name, and whether you use it or not, that's a decision you make later, but own that name so that it's in your...
That's a great piece of feedback. IGTV, is anyone IGTV? Yes, good. Right. Anything else, guys? Any other questions? I know we talked about a lot today. I charged you with a lot of homework. Hopefully it's both exciting and slightly intimidating. That was the goal. As a precursor, so the next time that I will be here, we'll be building upon this. If you're really interested in how this applies to your business and taking it a step further and making actions and where do I go from here, right? Do the work, get messy. If you find a little lost, you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Don't worry, I'll be back. We'll work through it. We'll get to the next step, right? So please, I've charged you with your homework. Go off and do customer oracles, get to know your customer. Your business will be more profitable and you'll make a lot more money. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming today, and especially thank you to Shama. As she mentioned, it's a 3-part series. We really hope you join us for the rest of the series. And before we go, I'd say thank you to our partners at the Business Improvement District for putting this on, as well as at the Chamber of Commerce. We couldn't have done it without our great partners.